they're changing my voice. This is actually part 15, and the one about trusting in God is part 16, to clarify that in case I had that wrong in the last video. I actually made part 16 before this one. Okay. So in part 15, this video, it is about the government and the governing class lines messing up everything because of their breeding campaigns, and their thinking. So I'd like to start off by saying something that's pretty obvious, but a lot of people tend to deny it. When, someone sees something is out of order, right? They go into a store or into a military unit and they don't know who's in charge. They say, I want to speak to the person in charge. They demand to speak to the person in charge. They say, who's in charge of this mess anyway? And here, when it comes to secular ruling, not on behalf of God, but secular ruling, it is the governing class and it is the government. So the governing class and the government, right? The government and the governing class have messed up everything. Okay, 1 in 4 little girls being sexually molested before the age of 18, 9 million people starving to death every year around the world, and its developed nations are responsible first and foremost. The United Nations, NATO, okay, the BRICS nations, the developed nations in general that have come together to exert power over these countries and to rule them through proxies. Most people who are into political science, they know that I'm right. They know that there's outside forces funding rebel groups and militias and making deals with various leaders in underdeveloped nations, leaders of gangs in developed nations, what have you, to make it so things go a certain way. As they say, the government brings the drugs and the CIA were caught bringing the drugs and so on and so forth. And it's not just, that was just that one incident. That's like saying that, Watergate, okay, was magically the only incident of corruption in the government. It's just proof, right? It's just not even the tip of the iceberg. It's proof that there's lots of corruption and there's lots of proof out there. Just like with the war on drugs, there's lots of proof that there's globalists and government people bringing in the drugs and making sure they go a certain way and making sure there's certain kill rates. Like Nazis had death rates and kill rates, right? They're eugenicists. If we look at the term eugenics, right, in the late 1800s, it was coined, if my memory serves me correctly, by Francis Galton. Okay, he was an Englishman, and it was America and the UK that gave Nazi Germany the idea to do eugenics. And they got the idea from ancient Rome and Greece and what have you. So keep in mind they're filming me, so, I'm going to try to make this brief here. So even when it comes to people getting their thoughts together, right, get your thoughts to get her, right, to get your soulmate, right, get your thoughts together. Or, you team up with a bunch of organized rape by deception types, right? And you work together to get her, which is what people are doing these days, and that's also coming from the government and the governing class. So this whole kind of rape by deception, all these females saying, what was I thinking dating this guy? And they're saying that, why they always date the losers and so on and so forth. Okay. That is because the government is putting powerful psychological operations. There's white psyops, there's black psyops, there's gray psyops, the various forms of trying to influence the sentiments and emotions and behaviors of a population. And so most people, right, if they heard this video, they know I'm right, especially if there's some kind of scholar, what have you. And keep in mind, people play stupid, so I'm overkilling this stuff. So when we look at people's inability also to have a sound financial plan, again, that goes back to the government, right? What are they teaching in school and what aren't they? I mean, how necessary is biology? How necessary, are these thick history books where people don't remember these things and they take history again in high school and again in college, right? So they're not teaching them to be moral and to be disciplined and to think effectively. They're teaching them about a lot of useless information. That goes back to the tree of knowledge versus the tree of righteousness. They didn't first make sure their population was mature and fair and just and righteous. Instead, they propound white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy and token minority supremacy instead of doing what is logical, okay, and teaching them to think in a way that is moral and to be inspired to be moral people. With all the churches, all the martial art groups, all the education, all the propaganda, why are people so immoral? Why are there so many criminals? Why are they so disenfranchised and marginalized, right? The government and the governing class have ruined everything. Okay, we look at the nations around the world, we look at the history of nations and governance, it's clear, right? When people govern a certain way, you get a certain population, right? And when people don't come together because they've been governed poorly and they've been raised poorly, right? Breeding and how they're thinking, right? You get the continuity of a horrible government. And when the government comes up with all kinds of control mechanisms, the governing class is very smug and feeling very secure. They're firmly to blame. And people are also to blame to some degree, right? But not as much as the government and the governing class. And the implications of accepting this are enormous. And it's key in why people won't admit it publicly. Okay, so again, people aren't disciplined. There's corporate harassment. There's sexual harassment. There's workplace bullying. Okay, the government has the power to crack down on sexual harassment. They have the power to write legislation to crack down on workplace bullying and the organized harassment. And there's 1 million cases of organized harassment every year, according to the Justice Department, and 5 million cases, right, of organized stalking and harassment, and 5 million cases of stalking in general. And a significant amount of it includes law enforcement. So why are they doing such a horrible job of regulating law enforcement, of promoting moral cultures? Why did they kill Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, suppressing them, and Bob Marley and suppressing him a certain way? Why do they, remix the music and remaster it a certain way so it has a different effect? And, why? Because what you see is what they plan to get. This is the expected output. The government is full of social scientists and psychologists, and they knew that if they did things this way, that they would get the output that you're seeing. So especially when they plan for that, and that's what they consider a favorable output, certainly we can all agree that they're first and foremost to blame, and that they need to kind of get it together. Okay, they need a moral order. They really need to step down and let me be in charge. But that's a story for another day. Okay. And of course, I'm not in it for the money, and people could see how I'm living my life and, what have you. A lot of transparency, and they'd see I'm doing the right thing. So I can firmly say that I would do a better job than they're doing, and that you wouldn't see anywhere near the amount of crime being committed, rape, murder. You wouldn't see people starving to death around the world if I was in charge of all the developed nations, if I was in charge of the world, what have you. Okay, it's just sheer negligence and a conspiracy of very immoral people that it gets the output that you're seeing. There's no other way to look at it. You can call it a collaboration, a concerted effort, but they're working together to make the world really bad. Just like Bob Marley said, the people who make the world a worse place don't take a day off. Okay, and so he said he's not going to take a day off either. Okay. So you see the homelessness, you see the dating, right? Why are two out of 3 young males, okay, single, and only 1 out of 3 young females? Well, logic would tell you it's older people who kind of run the system, right? Elon Musk is kind of older, Biden, Trump, these are older guys, right? Older Freemasons, corporate heads, what have you. And just magically, these guys that are known for sexual harassment, a lot of them, okay, magically, there's that discrepancy. Twice as many young males are single than young females, okay, and these guys are known for kind of going after the young females. It's pretty straightforward what's going on there. And certainly, there's a lot of LGBT people propounding lesbianism. A lot of those so-called lesbians are really bisexual, and they're dating guys at the same time as girls, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we see a lot, the civil rights violations. We see the iron triangle of economics and sociology, right? The bureaucrats and the lobbyists and the corporations and so on and so forth. Okay, working together to really bring down society. And why did they lose the war on drugs? Okay, why did they do such a bad job in the Middle East and spend trillions of dollars fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan? It's clear that the governing class is to blame. You look at the welfare spending in 2022, for example. They spent $1.2 or $1.3 trillion in 1 year on welfare. That's how poorly their school systems are doing. Look at all the education spending, the spending on education. Why are they doing such a poor job in employing people? Why don't they simply, have government jobs, have temporary jobs? People, instead of mugging somebody for drugs, they work somewhere for half an hour. Okay, a lot of times when drug addicts rob somebody, they see it coming. They start fiending. They start asking people for money. They're scrambling. Okay, if you have somewhere they can go where they can work for half an hour, instead of stealing $40 from somebody on the street or something, okay, they would probably do that instead. Logic would tell you, and that would cut crime significantly. And all those court fees and all these other fees and all the victims, the problems it creates the victims, all the problems in society that it creates would be reduced. Okay? It would save you money. So why aren't they doing that? It's just poor governance. If I, as one person, could think of all these things, my war on poverty plan and all this stuff, what about all these people that work for the government, all these politicians, their interns, all these political groups? They're to blame. You know, it's like the parable of the 10 minas, right? To the one who much is given, much is expected. The one who knows better and is given much will be beaten with many blows, aka they're more to blame. Okay, so by now you should be disgusted at the thought that people wouldn't first and foremost blame the government and the governing class and the cultures that they propound when it comes to the problems in the world. Thank you.